where did that come from, right? And it came from basically 50 years of sci-fi stories. The sperm whale industry is gone. Think about The Witcher on steroids. You can even Google, like, are the robots coming for my job? You'll find 100 different stories with basically that variation in the title. And AI is not going to replace the radiologist. And a radiologist working with AI is going to replace the radiologist who's not using AI.
Are the robots coming for our jobs? Are any of us going to be employed in the future once AI takes over? The answer is no, they're not coming for our jobs, and there will be more jobs as a result of this incredible advancement in technology. Futurist Dan Jeffries tells us exactly why.
Let's go.
Every time that we've talked in the past, we've obviously spoken about the future and what's coming with technology. Is the future here? ChatGPT? I mean, is this it? Is the AI taking over? Is Skynet coming for us?
It's here, man. I'm on a crusade to end. I'm on a crusade to end this kind of AI taking over, end of all jobs narrative. It's. In fact, I just finished an article on it because it's about, where did that come from, right? And it came from basically 50 years of sci-fi stories, and now the media picks it up, right? You can even Google, like, are the robots coming for my job? You'll find 100 different stories with basically that variation in the title. And what you have to understand is the sci-fi writers are writing about sci-fi before it existed for the vast majority of time, right? And what do? Basically, like, they just anthropomorphize it. So it's your, like, robot buddy R2-D2, or it's a villain in a metal suit, aka Ultron, or it's the thing gone crazy, right? And Hal, right? So that's 2 out of 3 evil eye gone wrong, but they're not real. They're just like adding in another human character to it. And I think the big problem is like people have now accepted that this is some weird fact, when in fact nothing has happened. Like, it hasn't happened. Like, and AI doesn't work this way. And then I think the worst part is that people just sort of echo this kind of, again and again. And when you think about something like, even like the 3 robot laws from Asimov, right? People go, oh, well, those are great. We should base it on that. No, we should not. First of all, we can't. They're just literary constructs. And second, they're literary constructs designed to do what stories do, which is drive conflict. The whole point of them is not to make laws that work, but to make it so that the robots end up in conflict with them so they can write a story, because that's the essence of the story. If I write a story where Johnny and Timmy went to the woods and they brought their dad's gun and nothing happened, that's not a story, right? The stories are about conflict. And so the entire thing about artificial intelligence has been conflict. And it's disappointing because I think we're going to miss out if this narrative gets too far ahead of itself. We're going to miss out on cures for cancer and, all kinds of amazing things. Think about self-driving cars. Like, a self-driving car, like, how many people is it acceptable to die in a self-driving car? And most people would say none. But humans are terrible drivers. Absolutely terrible. 50 million people are injured every year, and 1.3 million die on the road from humans. So if the AIs did it 50% better, it's a massive amount of life saved. If they did it, like, if they cut it down to a quarter, it's 75 billion or whatever it is, 975,000 people sort of running around playing with their kids and, like, having dinner, right? So I think we just have to be careful of this narrative. I think it's super cool stuff, and we end up, it's just a nice story to, like, create conflict, but I don't think it's true.
It is interesting that the media and the narrative always is around the one car crash when the car was self-driving.
Yeah.
As opposed to the, as you said, millions of trips where nothing happened, and as if humans are perfect drivers.
That's right. 16 car crashes with autopilot officially from Tesla over the past, like, 6 or 7 years, whatever it is. That's like 2 a year, right? And again, humans are just terrible at this stuff. And I think it's just, we tend to focus on that kind of big fiery thing, but we've sort of normalized the risk of humans doing stuff, right? And machines are actually just going to be much better at this stuff. And the other thing is, they're not coming for all the jobs. Like, but they're coming. They're cyborgs, right? They're going to work with us on things, right? Like, an AI is not going to replace the radiologist, and a radiologist working with AI is going to replace the radiologist who's not using AI. That's how it's going to work, right? And it's how it's going to work across 1,000 fields. We're seeing it in art now, right? And people are going, oh gosh, someone typed a text prompt and it's every job is gone. No, it's not. There's not a single generative AI company out there thinking about it that way. They're thinking, how do I enhance this workflow, right? And there's boring parts of it, right? If I'm a concept artist and I draw this character, that's the fun part. And then when I have to do turnarounds where I have to draw the same character from like 8 different angles, that's boring and tedious. Like there's already models that can do that part. That's awesome, right? That lets people focus on the parts that they love. So I want to see a big shift in the narrative. And I think there's always these techno panics, these moral techno panics. And when you look back, everything from like cameras to like umbrellas to like bicycles, we're going to like destroy the fundamentals of civilization. And we've always adapted. We've always adapted. And then it's like, well, this time is different. It is not. It's not different. Like technology is not outside of us. It's a part of us. It's always been a part of us.
Right. It's a shift. But could you make the argument with ChatGPT as an example that maybe this eliminates the first or second year jobs, the intern or the assistant, the person who's doing the first draft? Because the workflow of something like ChatGPT, summarize this article for me, write me a story about such and such. It's obviously not in its final form, but maybe it at least eliminates that first sort of iteration.
Maybe, except like there's another version of it. So like at my foundation, the AI Infrastructure Alliance, I've got a fantastic operations person who speaks like 6 or 7 languages, right? And English is not her native language, but she's a genius. She knows how to put thoughts together in a clear and coherent fashion. And so she, wrote up the newsletter, and usually she'll like write up the newsletter, and then I have to like be I'm the writer. I have to take it and like pretty much toss a whole bunch of stuff out, change stuff. But she took it and fed it to ChatGPT and said, make it more dynamic, make it, correct it or whatever. And when she gave it to me, I had to change like 10 words. That's awesome, right? To me, and when I asked it, right.
That's exactly, I write a newsletter every single day, and it's like my final edit.
Right. It's like having a free extra editor, and that's amazing. Like, and now if you ask it to write something from scratch, it's going to create something that like maybe makes the point, but it's also kind of bullshit, right? Not in the way that you want to make it, right? So it's kind of like, can you get to the point where you're making like real concrete, strong points? Sometimes it's going to do that. But in general, it kind of writes like a high school essay style, right? Which is fine, unless you know how to prompt it and say, don't do that. Like, take this language, take this structure, make it more dynamic. I think, again, more people are going to use it like that. And the other thing is, there's precedence for this kind of stuff, right? So we tend to think about like the jobs that'll disappear or whatever. First of all, we've already destroyed all the jobs in history multiple times, okay? Like, you did not tan leather, like, to make your clothes today or hunt the water buffalo for your food. 99% of people used to be involved in agriculture. Now it's 3%. And we've always created more and more varied jobs. Like, yes, you can flip the light switch and the electric light comes on. Nobody is clamoring for us to go back to hunting sperm whales to dig the white gunk out of their head because, like, the sperm whale industry is gone. Like, so that's, to me, when I think about these things, we change, we adapt. Like, there's a new set of things that come around. And yes, sometimes there's things that disappear, but that is okay. It doesn't happen overnight. Like, that's the other part of the narrative where it's like, bam, like you wake up tomorrow, everyone's out of work. And it doesn't work that way. And the other thing is, there's a great book called Innovation and Its Enemies, and it talks about the history of the music industry. Okay. And in the 1940s, a bunch of the recording, like the biggest kind of like group of musicians got together, and they were like, okay, the thing that's destroying the music industry is recorded music, right? Records. And the reason that they were worried about it was because all of the musicians job on the radio, like they played live on the radio, they didn't play records, right? And so they're like, we've got to stop this notoriously horrible thing. And so for a couple of years, they actually managed to like stop the recording of music for a period of time. Now, it's not, people tend to think about it in this like 1 to like 0-sum game of like, oh, it's true. In general, over time, the musicians on the radio lost their job. But now the impact of recorded music has made music so much bigger and so much more widespread And now, ironically, even one of the biggest ways musicians make money again is through touring, because streaming has changed the music industry again. You can't go a decade without something out to destroy the music industry, and yet the music industry adapts again and again. That's my thinking. I don't know why we panic over stuff all the time and why it never works out that way, and yet we just do it again and again. I think it's human nature to be terrified of stuff. I think we like to be afraid.
There's going to be a huge movement towards becoming very good at prompting AI. Becoming an AI prompter, the guy who knows how to get the most out of the technology, could be an entire new wave of jobs when you're thinking about it that way.
Yeah, like it's actually programming a system with words. It's not with code. It's programming a system with words. That's really what it is. In its current iteration, AIs will change over time, right? And maybe it won't be about giant training sets, for instance. It'll be they'll come up with ways that teach it to learn like with feedback, and by like a human learns, right? Where you take the kid out in the back throwing the ball for a week, he'll learn how to throw the ball. He may not be in Derek Jeter or whatever and throwing, going to the majors, but he could study over time, to become that thing. We're going to start to mirror those techniques, and then it'll be who's the best AI trainer and how do you train the artificial intelligence to do things. I think those are going to be important, and I think you mentioned something that's super, super key here, right? And that is, it's really easy to imagine, like, okay, the whale oil, the whale hunters are going to be gone, right? And the lamplighters are going to be gone. It's very hard to picture all the things that come after it, right? And it's like once electric light takes off, all of a sudden you have all these like nightclubs and things like that really, that existed in tiny form. You have bars, you have dinner out late, you have people be able to work at different times, you have office buildings, right? And all of a sudden you have this kind of explosion of economic activity that comes from electric light. So there's always these additional things. And then when you think about something like a web designer, right? It's very hard to imagine a web designer if you're an 18th century farmer, right? Because it's built on the back of 20 other technologies, right? The discovery of electricity and wiring it all together, and digital technology and the internet and computers and web browsers. You can't imagine all these things. So people can see that the lamplighter is going to be gone, but they can't see the 50 things that replace it. And I don't want to go back to the only jobs were like serf and Viking raider and like housewife and teacher, like those are fine. Like
Viking raider does sound kind of fun, to be honest.
Yeah,
maybe for a weekend or something. Yeah,
for a weekend, right? Like, but like virtually, maybe because like I don't want to be maimed or mutilated. But we just have so many more varied jobs now, and I think that's because these one technologies change something, and it's a massive technology, right? And you look back, like there was a writer writing about how information overload, for instance, was destroying our mind. It was weakening our ability to think clearly. And you'd think he was writing about social media, but he was writing in 1500 about the printing press, right? Never played with email or Twitter. Right. And like, it's the same argument today. Like, oh, we're dumber now. We're rotting our minds. We blah, 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 blah. And yet we always seem to adapt and create new things. And I think that's exciting. I think too many people miss it, and too many people just focus on the negative.
And this really is just the beginning. I mean, ChatGPT is absolutely mind blowing, but when you see the exponential projections of what it will be able to do, even in the coming months and years, to your point, it's extremely difficult to imagine the final end state of this.
Yeah, and they're going to get better with getting it to be more aligned to what people want. And in fact, all the people were sort of gleefully pointing out how it's stupidly made up answers or whatever. It's like, like you just used it wrong. Right? Like, first of all, like, just Google that. Why do you need to answer that question? And then second of all, like, it's what they didn't realize is that everybody who was pointing out all the hacks and the things that went wrong there, right? They were able to say, like, this is something where, it's like they didn't realize they were part of the distributed QA team for it, right? And that they were that OpenAI was making it better at every step of the way. And they were already doing that early with reinforcement learning, and then it gets better. You have companies like Anthropic working on a constitution of things for AI. So it's like it has 10 principles, and then they keep automatically tweaking it to like, get closer and closer to those principles over time. So we're going to learn these new techniques. I think the other thing is a lot of folks are of this mindset now. I was just writing about this in an article that's going to come out in a week or two, how everybody kind of thinks, we've got to solve all these problems in isolation. We can't release this until it's absolutely perfect, right? And you're like, yeah, imagine if like, they told the kitchen knife manufacturers, like, you absolutely cannot release this for cutting vegetables until you make sure nobody ever gets stabbed with it. Like, it doesn't matter that 99.99999% of people are going to cut vegetables with it. You've got to find a magical solution to this. Or they have to find the solutions in isolation. That doesn't work either. Like, the CTO of OpenAI was on record saying, look, we thought the biggest problem was going to be political disinformation, right? So they were working on that problem, trying to figure out how to stop it. No, the biggest problem, they were completely wasting their time. Nobody used it for that. The biggest problem was spammers writing more like crap to sell you crap you don't need. And they couldn't have seen that problem until it gets out into the real world, because that's how problems get solved. Right? Like, humans are very creative. The systems, we're great at finding exploits, finding loopholes, getting around things. So only when you put stuff out into the real world can you actually solve these problems. There's this whole concept that we can solve everything in isolation. It's not that we can think of nothing in isolation, but behind closed doors, we're going to be able to make these things perfect is ludicrous. It's really ludicrous. And I don't know how we've gotten there as a society, other than society has become so successful. The infant mortality rate is so low. Like, so many people live below the poverty line. Like, people don't believe this either. That's the craziest thing. Like, but the statistics are there. It's the greatest time in the history of the world to be alive.
Literally always. Now is always better than before.
Right.
It just is. Yeah.
Right. Like, so it's this wonderful time to be alive. And yet, like, I think that's paradoxically made us more afraid of risk. Like, in other words, when you've got $100 million, you're more afraid of losing it. And I think we've got food stability and no like massive wars, and like, we just overcome a global plague like in a couple of years with minimal amount of damage, considering like the amount of damage of plagues in the past, like, the Black Plague, which wiped out, half of Europe, right? So like the technology's gotten better, our ability to cope has gotten better, and yet I think that's paradoxically made us more afraid of things, and that's a shame, because I feel like some of these technologies we're going to miss out, or we're going to restrain them for longer than they need to be. They're eventually going to win out. They're inevitable, but we may restrain them longer than we need to, and that makes me sad.
Yeah, and ChatGPT is not dangerous relative to Web 2, previous technology, the amount of misinformation that's out there. You just have to understand that it's effectively in beta and that we're the focus group.
That's right. I mean, look, people are like, oh, the high school students are cheating. Newsflash, high school.
Good for you. They were already cheating, guys.
Yeah, they've been cheating for a long time, right? Like, there are, I think, real harms, right? And we use that term a little too loosely now, right? Like, if you're a foreigner and somebody won't rent to you, right? That's real harm. If you're the wrong color and someone won't rent to you, or somebody punches you in the face, that's real harm. But, we also get to this point now where we're sort of afraid of anything. And like, if we disagree with something, that I've been harmed by it, that's not correct. We get too wrapped up in this kind of thing now.
Words are violence. Words are violence. Right.
Yeah. This kind of concept of like, doesn't agree with my political beliefs. It doesn't matter what they are, whether you're like arch conservative or super left or somewhere in between. That's not harm, right? So I think we have to focus back on the things that do matter. We don't want ChatGPT advising kids the best way to commit suicide, or like giving, wrong drug interaction right to somebody, because eventually people will use it that way. In other words, Google is right to be afraid of its search business now, because eventually if I want a recipe, right, I don't want to go to that website where it's got an ad every other paragraph that's jumping out at me, and thanks to the GDP, I've got to click accept now, and are you sure you want to accept now? And it's like, I just tell me how to make sausage and peppers.
Give me the answer.
Tell me how to make sausage and peppers. And we don't want it to say like sausage and peppers with arsenic or something, right? So there are some real things, but when it makes up an answer, like those things are readily fixable with it being able to search things behind the scenes, and already people kind of doing those types of things, and they're going to get better at aligning it. I don't worry too much about those things. And I do think that there are real issues, but I think we just get overblown about what those issues are. and we worry about every little thing. And there's this kind of gotcha thing now where people are like, gotcha, it messed up one time. It's totally worthless. But that's absurd. That's like saying your bike crashed one time and bikes are useless, right? Like, bikes are awesome. It doesn't make any sense.
I think it's a sausage and peppers with an arsenic reduction. So the arsenic doesn't hurt you. Like when you put wine in a recipe, it doesn't get you drunk, right? So the arsenic's fine.
Arsenic foam, you want to do
it's fine. It's just a topping.
That's right.
But interestingly, that means that the model of moving fast and breaking things is effective most of the time, right? Obviously, I pander in cryptocurrencies over here. That's the generally the tone and the topic of these conversations. We moved fast and broke a lot of things, and yes. I'm not likening it to AI necessarily, but I can see an argument at times because this is people's money, or maybe being slower and deliberate could have benefited a lot of people.
So what you touch upon in terms of the way to think about these things is where there are actual real harm done. Like, again, when we talk about harm, it shouldn't be used so loosely. It's a very specific term. Like, I punch you in the face, but if you stab me in the chest, those are harms. But if I steal all your money, right, these are harms, right? If if the motor is blowing up in the old Pinto or whatever every time it gets hit in the back, that's harm. Right? These things have to be addressed. But I think you do have to define a few sets of categories: lethal autonomous weapons, military uses, if it's dealing with medical advice, right? If it's dealing with people's money and loans and things like that. There are things that I think we could clearly and calmly kind of come to an understanding on. Now, that may be challenging in today's world because people are going to want to layer on all these other things that they believe is harm that's not. But these kinds of things are we could say, look, in these areas there's a higher standard, there's a higher level of accountability, there's a higher level of things that you're held to. And they did things like this. They used to do these things in the past, like during the early biotech treaties in the 80s that were adopted. The scientists, when they figured out genetic engineering in the 70s, were like, wait a minute, this could be really dangerous. Let's put a voluntary moratorium on it. Let's come up with rules. And then those rules were adopted into law that basically said, okay, you're going to have to prove that there was an actual harm done. Like, there's got to be evidence of it. And then it's kind of flipped in the modern world in 2000, particularly with kind of the EU into the precautionary principle, which is like, well, if we think genetic engineering is bad, we have the right to just, ban it in our country. And they gave kind of member, states the right to do that. So it kind of flipped the thing back on the technology and said, go ahead and prove a negative, right? Prove it'll never do any harm, right? So I think the earlier way, going back to the original way of saying, here's what harm is. Here's how you define it. Here's what evidence looks like, right? And here's how, the penalties for doing so across these kind of strata, right? Self-driving cars, weapons, medical advice, drug and whatever it is, right? We can define these kind of coherently and clearly. I think that's where you do have to be a little bit more careful. And I think that those are going to end up being more regulated anyway, right? And that's where we have to step back a little bit and not sort of move fast and break things as much as crypto is broken things.
Do you see any interesting implementations of AI in crypto, partnerships, or things working together? It seems like it would be a natural marriage.
I mean, it seems like it could be a way of doing distributed funding for research or for reinforcement learning or crowdsourcing. It could be really useful. But the downside is, of course, you can kind of already do that with regular fiat money too, right? And I think there's ways to do it. I have to admit, I've been a little bit down on crypto in the last a few months. In a way, I haven't been in my entire career. Yeah, but it's more than just Sam Bankman and Freeman and everything and this kind of stuff. Because I'm tired of that feed. I'm telling my phone no. Yeah. Until it learns. The AI learns the stuff showing me that story. I think where I'm disappointed is more at a fundamental level, and that is for many years, probably 5 or 6 years, I've been saying, go develop really cool apps. Develop a marketplace that's like, I don't know, like WeChat on steroids, right? Like WeChat, if you know that it's like a huge platform, you can buy tickets, get parking spaces, go to, all kinds of stuff. It's an entire e-commerce platform. Make something like that in crypto where it's all, where the vast majority of stuff is bought in crypto, whether it's stickers or anything else, and make it so that it's just an amazing, use case or, for us to do it. And I think what we've just continued to do, unfortunately, is kind of build semi-decentralized versions of the same stuff we already had, but in a kind of hackier way, right? It's been like, well, we can lend some money, or like we can distribute some money, or we can make some other kind of money again. And it's like, where have been the identity protocols? Where have been the distributed applications? Where have been like the apps that I can't live without, so that I don't even know that it's crypto? I want to download something and click it and be using it, and magically it tells me, oh, your wallet now for using the app has got coins you can now spend. Like I'm playing a video game. Like I've wanted that for some time, and I think just sort of looking around, I go, okay, I guess we're just swapping money around, and that's fine. I still think it gets there. It certainly gets there over time, but I sometimes feel like I'm the only one talking about this, and I don't know why. I don't know why anyone's not trying to build like a super killer app, or if they are, their definition of killer app is just weird.
Do you think that's because we're early, or because people are so consumed with the profit?
I think because it's money, it's probably the second. Like it's too much of a siren song, right? It's like the idea that like you can spin up money from nothing. And by the way, all money's spun up from nothing. But the idea that you could create value
yourself,
right, out of your without consensus from a bazillion other like people, like you used to have to come together after a war and like form a protocol and go, we shall now make the monetary system or whatever. There was a lot of stuff that went into new monetary systems historically. But now it's kind of like, boom, poof, I've created a new monetary system. And I think the dangers of things, like we go, oh my gosh, the SBF thing, like how could they have loaned out their money to another company? Well, banks have been doing that for forever, and insurance companies. And what's his name? The richest man in the world at one point, Warren Buffett, was making his money from like having a giant, insurance company and then using the money there to like invest in stuff. So we have regulations for stuff like that, and we have kind of precedents for that. So that kind of thing that he created is not new, and it's not even interesting. It's boring, right? And it was based on, a coin that really probably did, just it could implode overnight, and that was sort of the real downside of these kinds of things. It's like we haven't gotten to the point where the monetary system is feeding something that is truly resilient, and it's not the money itself, based on its distribution of the people who have it, that makes it resilient. Why is the dollar so resilient? Because so many people are bought into the idea of it, and people weirdly dismiss this. Like, oh, it's all going to zero. That's crazy town. It's not going to zero.
Crazy town.
It's total crazy town. It's the fact that we have these collective belief systems as human beings, and there's this history behind it, and there's this government, this whole identity of a nation state, all these things that go into it, that infuses that money with something. There's been nothing floating the crypto in the same way that's kind of been that sort of zealous, even religious affiliation, to this thing. And then a wider market that it serves, like the idea that I can buy my coffee or, donuts or, a sushi or PlayStation or whatever with that money. That's what really gives that money value. We haven't created that secondary system in crypto that allows that value to then reflect back on the currency itself. I think that's been the real tragedy of it to me, is that I thought we'd be further along with it, right? And on the flip side with AI, I thought it would take longer, and now we're getting ahead faster than I thought. That's the one downside of being a futurist. You can never actually figure out, what's going to happen at some point, probably, if it kind of goes in this direction. But getting the timing right is always wrong. And I think with crypto, I've been in love with it for so long, and I felt like it was just going to be further at this point in my life, and it's not. I feel like we're in the same place we were, 3 or 4 years ago, and it hasn't changed yet. I don't know what the trigger is going to be. I hope somebody's out there working on something amazing.
Is there anything that you see in the pipeline that you think could be that sort of killer app, something in gaming or potentially metaverse? Listen, we have all these buckets, right, that we've seen sort of have their speculation and bubbles, but none of them have panned out, to your point, to be anything. No game in crypto is competitive with Fortnite or Call of Duty, right? I mean, we just don't see the quality.
Yeah, so there might be something in the pipeline. I haven't seen it specifically. Like, I can't call it out and say that's it. And I would say at some point in time, maybe there's a marriage with how you asked this earlier, and maybe this is the answer. I don't know the exact manifestation it would take, but when I look at something like artificial intelligence and the way it's going to change certain things, let's say it does start to devastate the ad business in some way, right? It's $190 billion business for Google alone, right? And they're, supposedly issued the code red and said, well, all these language models, let's start to put them out there. But they've been more conservative because, the government can look at them and the big tech has been soured and in the people have soured on big tech and this kind of stuff. So why risk it? But when your business is in an existential risk, wait a minute, probably going to take the ropes off. So I think all of a sudden you start to see Google getting into the fray, you start to see artificial intelligence change things. You start to see people like Microsoft, who basically putting $10 billion into OpenAI, essentially say, look, Bing's been an off-ramp for forever. We don't care about destroying the search business. Like we care about getting more of it. And if we can get more of it by embedding ChatGPT in there and it summarizes websites or at that point, the ad revenue starts to decline. And so you have to come up with a new business model. And when you think about the ad revenue, that came out of necessity as well, right? Like everybody was building all these apps on the web. It was all free, right? And somebody's got paid for it, right? Like it's always shocked me that people are like, what? You're tracking me? Like, you want to sell me stuff? Yeah, you've been getting this complex service for free for a decade. What are you talking about? Like, who do you think pays for those services? People in this app that you love to use every day, right? And you're mad that someone wants to sell your shoes? I don't understand. So in this case, if that starts to go down though, and artificial intelligence starts to be your interface to the world, it starts to be the thing where you're like, I need advice. I need to know to buy my sister for Christmas, and it knows how to go, look at the things that she likes in the store and tell you like, well, she doesn't really like wine, but she likes beer and she generally likes IPAs, or Belgian whites, and there's a store on the way to her house on the 23rd when you go there, well, right? Like that becomes this interface, and it's less about, hey, I've got to find the answer and troll through sites. Then maybe there's an opportunity for crypto to start becoming kind of a way to pay for things there. Like, and I would think of it as machine to machine money, like not people trading the money around, but kind of like the money just sort of algorithmically moving around to pay for services. And you're like, I topped up my wallet and like it streamed out to a bunch of things. And like, I only paid 25 cents for Spotify because I barely listened to it. And then I went on a road trip and, I paid 15, the equivalent of $15 in crypto because of like use case consumption or whatever. And machine to machine learning, these kinds of things I think potentially could be something interesting, but it's almost like the other thing has to happen first for there to be a necessity, for it. And I think those things can be interesting. But who knows? I still think that it's about building the economic systems, right? The around crypto, and stop worrying about the money. Like it's a religious argument whether deflationary or inflationary or partially inflationary or the Austrian, who cares, right? The fact is all of these things exist simultaneously in the world, right? For a reason. We need all of them. We need loans. We need deflationary things. We need the hedges against like downturns. We need inflationary currency. We need all of these things. And anybody who doesn't understand that doesn't really understand economics, right? They think they understand economics, but they don't. They have more of a religious affiliation with economics as opposed to just observing reality. And we need that crypto to kind of embody all of those different systems and then also provide something new. In fact, when you look at a technology, it's when it provides something new is when it really takes off. So like, if you think about the Kindle, there were ways to read books digitally, and they kind of sucked. Like you could scratch the CD, like it wasn't portable. I'm not going to carry around the CRT on the subway, right? It burns up my eyes. But then all of a sudden, like, it's like the Kindle comes around and it's like, oh, wait a minute, like it's got a battery life of a month, and it looks like ink. It's easy on the eyes, and I can store wait a minute, I could store like a 10,000 books in here in the same form factor. I could store one. All of a sudden, it mirrors all the old like capabilities, and then it provides new capabilities. Crypto has barely mirrored the old capabilities, right? And it's got to provide new capabilities. It's got to mirror the old ones and provide new capabilities. So I don't know how much longer it takes, but it's not there yet. I don't know why.
I will never forget when I was in college. It must have been 1998 or 1999 when my first friend, who was always ahead of technological trends, got his first MP3 player, and it held 13 songs.
Yeah, right.
And we said, holy shit, you can put an entire CD on this thing. I didn't even understand that it was a file. I said, where's the music? But because before that, you had to put your CD into your Discman and it would skip all over the place and you had to flip them out. But it was even mind blowing to me that you could effectively put one CD into this digital format and listen to it and not worry about it, skipping or being problematic.
Right. Because it was providing new characteristics, right? Like it was cool. We could already take music on the go, but it was imperfect. And then all of a sudden you could mirror the old characteristics. You could take it on the go, but it improved upon the last day. And that's also the other thing is every new technology when it comes out, I should remember this in my own advice. Like every new technology when it comes out is flawed, inherently flawed, tremendously flawed. And then over time it gets better. Like you fix the things. Like initially people actually argued that you shouldn't get a tractor because the horse is superior. Right. Now, and for a long period of time, it was like, well, the horse, you don't got to buy gas for it. And it just sort of ignored that you had to buy food for it and clean up its poop. But you could basically have a new one when it broke down as opposed to buying a new one. So, but eventually over time, the upside of tractor, eventually displaces horse. And I think the same thing is when the technology starts to mirror all the old things plus provide those new characteristics is when it starts to make that leap across that chasm. And that's when it starts to get the adoption. And I just haven't seen that. Like I still haven't even seen things that I would expect, like, I don't know, like we could build an algorithmic protocol for resetting passwords on a wallet. That's it doesn't even feel that hard to me. Like when you call a bank and you're like, here are my 3 words and like, here's my fingerprint and here's whatever, like we could bake that into a freaking automated protocol so that, grandma and me, and the guy like searching the dump for his Bitcoin wallet and like trying to like remember the password that he changed one letter on and he's screwed and now he's got one more guess before it locks him for eternity. These are terrible problems. These terrible crap. Like why we haven't even fixed that problem? I don't know why.
Yeah, it's definitely not ready for the spotlight with the mainstream. I mean, grandma's never writing down her code on a piece of paper, her private keys, and throwing it in a safe and hoping for the best. And you would think that we would have gotten farther along, even with just private key security and logins and the very basic things that it takes to send this to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a blockchain, like a distributed database. I can look up information in many ways, right? So, like, could I not have a protocol that that allows me to reset like a key, right? And obviously we don't want it being attacked, but I'm sure that there are smart enough people to figure out how to make it very resilient. I mean, we've got the keys based on, 30 words or 20 words or whatever now, right? The deterministic keys. That was cool. Like, okay, now I can remember the wallet. Now there are ways to attack it, right? If you're foolish enough, to show those, then somebody could just put those down and they don't need your password. Right. So there are flaws, but we could still come up with a protocol for this kinds of stuff. And I don't know what's holding people back other than maybe it's not interesting enough but I think you would develop those things if you developed a whole platform, right? If you developed a platform for doing cool stuff, you might be tempted then in addition to, minting your money to like develop usability around your money because the main point is people using your platform. That to me is how things happen, right? It's like, we developed the seatbelt because cars got really fast, right? We didn't develop the seatbelt before they got fast, right? So I think that's the thing we got to get to.
I think we'll get there eventually, but I do think that it's fair to say that it hasn't been as fast as one would have maybe anticipated. But we could say that crypto has somewhat had its 0 to 1 moment and just has not been able to accelerate far beyond 1. But then you look at ChatGPT and it's like OpenAI went 0 to 1 and now we're at 5 in a week.
Yes.
Right. And so if that's going to go to 10, what are the next things in AI that are exciting you?
There's so many things in AI that are exciting me. And I think all the generative AI is super exciting. I think like speeding up the artistic workflow. I think if the metaverse becomes a thing, it becomes a thing because of generative AI. In other words, our ability to kind of like rapidly create things on the fly in real time. I think people will be co-creating with it. You'll be storyboarding with it, and having it correct stories and generating initial stills, and all these kinds of things, texture. So there's a million kinds of things there. I think, drug discovery is a huge, possibility. I think we can get to the point where personalized drugs can be made for people, or it's going to become cost feasible to research smaller diseases that are, that generally you just wouldn't have the economic incentive because it costs you $1 billion to develop this drug. So you're going to concentrate on, big cancers and AIDS, but you're not going to concentrate on the disease that, you can't go out in the sun and you need to stay under a heat lamp, 15 hours a day or whatever it is that, 100,000 people on the planet have. But maybe you can now, right? Maybe you can start to look at those things because you can speed up the process. I see this thing as an accelerant for everything. I don't see anything on Earth that would not benefit from getting more intelligent, from supply chains to economics to, right? Like nobody is going, you know what, I wish my supply chain was stupider, right? I really wish that material science, like discovering new antibiotics was slower, right? Like I wish that discovering new materials was slower. Nobody's saying that. So everyone is going to use it for accelerated pattern recognition, accelerated design of material science. You got drones flying over agriculture looking for like diseased plants and being able to spray them with pesticides, so you're using less pesticides, right? These kinds of things, this kind of automation and this kind of scaling up of intelligence is truly exponential. We use that word way too much, way too much in society. It's like a pogo stick comes out, it's going to be an exponential revolution on transport, right? But like in this case, right? Like this literally. This really is you're talking about industrializing intelligence. That's what I wrote recently. It's the age of industrialized intelligence, right? And if you think about the opening of that, I just was focused on video game making in a decade, right? Where you can probably make a AAA game with 100 people instead of 5 to 10,000. And it's not going to be, oh no, now all those people are gone or out of a job. No, now instead of 10 AAA games or 5 AAA games a year, we're going to have 1,000.
Way more games, right? That's
right. Because you're going to have more people who are like, boom, I can draw this with an undersketch, and then it'll paint it up, and then I'll iterate 20 versions of it, and I'll paint over the top of that, and then I'll go, oh wait a minute, this one's amazing. Iterate on that. Okay, good. Boom, that's done. Now create the turnarounds for that. Okay, cool. Now export that to the 3D modeler. The 3D modeler is going to look at it and go, okay, cleaned up this, and this, and now it's throw it into the scene and see what it can do. And the writer is going to be working with in a super advanced ChatGPT thing where she's feeding like meta story prompts to it and going like, write this chapter again, and going, oh, this is great. Like, let's create an infinite side missions and all these kinds of things, right? And you think about The Witcher on steroids, right? Like infinite side missions that are actually compelling, right? And unique and personalized music where you're like, I like this plus this plus this. It'll be like the beginning of Her where they ask you 3 questions and you're like, okay, cool. Well, you probably like old jazz and like tech, and it'll be kind of that infinite thing of that, right? Or those kinds of things to me are just tremendously exciting, and I want people to embrace it. I want people to stop like being nervous about it. I want this story, this mass panic, to stop. Again, we thought bicycles were going to destroy the fabric of society and like women's morals. Like bicycles are pretty awesome, and AI is going to be even more so than the bicycle. Like literally, there are story headlines for those. I'm not even making those up.
No, I've seen it.
Right, yeah. Right. And so it's like for this thing, it's like every single thing is going to benefit from having intelligence sort of baked into it. And even if it's not fully sentient, I don't need that AGI and whatever the hell. That's crap. I don't need it to be like a full human that does whatever it wants. In fact, I don't even necessarily want that. I want it to be something that can be like, an augment and a back and forth with me. I want it to be aligned to me and what I'm doing. That's And we're going to have that baked into everything. You're going to have the personal assistants baked into things, and it's going to know how to help you like level up your writing and everything. It's just, to me, it's going to be a true renaissance, and we're going to see, I don't know, just an incredible explosion of kind of new kinds of jobs and new technologies, and we're going to benefit from accelerating things. And whenever you accelerate things, you get new stuff, right? It's like now, people tend to think, oh gosh, like, someone generated an image from, I don't know, Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or whatever for their article. Like now nobody's going to get paid for the articles. Well, it's like, there's already 25 million like free stock photographers out there. Did that destroy the stock photography industry? No, the stock photography is still doing just fine. And now and maybe it's going to be for the two kids, who just got out of college, who couldn't have afforded, Shutterstock anyway. Now their article is going to look better too, right? Just like in the old days when you were like, sorry, Adobe pirating Photoshop or whatever as a kid. Guess what? All those kids learned how to use Photoshop, went on to become like artists, and now like their corporate license is paid for, and like congratulations, right? Like they benefit from those kind of things. So I think that's the kind of stuff that's really coming down the pipe. I think that's just tremendously exciting time to be alive. I don't know why anybody doesn't feel that way. It's tremendously exciting.
Well, after talking to you, I'm a hell of a lot less scared of the robots coming for us and our jobs. So thank you very much for that. Where can everybody follow you after this conversation? Not that they haven't seen you on this channel multiple times before, but okay, yeah.
There's my Substack. That's where I tend to write the most these days. It's I forget what the URL is, but you Google Dan Jeffries Substack, you'll find it. I think it's called Future History is my Substack. So that's the one to find, and you can find me on LinkedIn or wherever else, Twitter, if you really care about that platform anymore.
Well, next time, I use it a lot less than I used to. I have to admit,
me too,
even with
man.
as many followers as I have, I actually removed it from my phone because I found it to be a distraction. So I tweet a lot less, and I kind of never read it. So I think that's if my whole sort of existence and livelihood has been based on Twitter, and I'm willing to use it less, I think that's definitely a signal. For sure. So listen, then we got to do this again. Just call me when you finally see crypto do something that interests you again.
I'll call you in.
Okay, it might be a while. We'll have to do it before then.
2030, but I'm always happy to come out. We always have fun, man. So let's do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cheers, man. Have a good one.
You too. That's dope.